The Sister of the Sun. A long time ago there lived a young prince whose favorite playfellow was the son of the gardener who lived on the grounds of the palace. The king would have preferred his choosing a friend of the pages who were brought up at court, but the prince would have nothing to say to them, and as he was a spoilt child, all things went his way. And the gardener's boy was quiet and well behaved, and he was suffered to be in the palace morning, noon, and night. The game the children loved the best was a match at archery, for the king had given them two bows exactly alike, and they would spend whole days in trying to see which could shoot the highest. This is always very dangerous, as it was a great wonder they did not put their eyes out, but somehow or other they managed to escape. One morning, when the prince had done his lessons, he ran out to his friend. They both hurried off to the lawn, which was their usual playground. They took their bows out of the little hut where their toys were kept and began to see which could shoot the highest. At last they happened to let fly their arrows both together, and when they fell to the earth, again the tail feather of the golden hen was found sticking to one. Now, the question began to arise, whose was the lucky arrow, for they were both exactly alike, and to look at them closely you could see that there was no difference between them. The prince declared that the arrow was his, and the gardener's boy was quite sure that it was his, and on this occasion the gardener's boy was quite... No. And on this occasion he was perfectly right, but as they could not decide the matter, they went straight to the king. When the king had heard the story, he decided that the feather belonged to his son, but the other boy would not listen to this and claimed the feather for himself. At length the king's patience gave way, and he said very angrily, "Very well. If you are so sure that this feather is yours, yours it shall be. Only if you have to seek..." Trust him. "Very well. If you are so sure that the feather is yours, yours it shall be. Only if you will seek till you find the golden hen with the feather missing from her tail, and if you fail to find her, your head will be the forfeit." The boy had need of all his courage to listen silently to the king's words. He had no idea where the golden hen might be, or even, if discovered, how he was to get at her. But there was nothing for it to be done but to do the king's bidding, and he felt that the sooner he left the palace, the better. So he went home and put some food into a bag, and then set forth, hoping that some accident might show him which path he takes. After walking for several hours, he met a fox, who seemed inclined to be friendly, and the boy was so glad to have anyone to talk to that he sat down and entered into a conversation. "Where are you going?" asked the fox. "I have to find a golden hen who lost a feather out of her tail," answered the boy. "But I don't know where she lives or how I shall catch her." "Oh, I can show you the way," said the fox, who was really very good-natured. "Far towards the east, in that direction, lives a beautiful maiden who is called the Sister of the Sun. She has 3 golden hens in her house. Perhaps the feather belongs to one of them." The boy was delighted at this news, and they walked on all day together, the fox in front and the boy behind. When the evening came, they lay down to sleep, and put a knapsack under their heads for a pillow. Suddenly, at midnight, the fox gave a low whine and drew near to his bedfellow. "Cousin," he whispered very low, "there is someone coming to take the knapsack away from me. Look over there." And the boy, peeping through the bushes, saw a man. "Oh, I don't think he will rob us," said the boy. And when the man drew near, he told them his story, which was not much more interesting in the stranger than he asked leave to travel with him, as he might be of some use. So when the sun rose again, they set out, the fox in front as before, the man and the boy following. After some hours they reached the castle of the Sister of the Sun, who kept the golden hens among her treasures. They halted before the gate, and took counsel as to which of them should go and see the lady herself. I think it would be best for me to enter and steal the hens, said the fox, but this did not please the boy at all. No, it is my business, so it is right that I should go, answered he. You will find it a very difficult matter to get hold of the hens, replied the fox. Oh, nothing is likely to happen to me, returned the boy. So go then, said the fox. But be careful not to make any mistake. Steal only the hen which has a feather missing from the tail, and leave the others alone. The man listened, but did not interfere. The boy entered the court of the palace. He soon spied 3 hens strutting about proudly, though they were really anxiously wondering if there was not some grains lying on the ground that they might have missed to eat. And as the last one passed by him, he saw that she had 1 feather missing from her tail. At this sight, the youth darted out and seized the hen by the neck so that she would not struggle. Then, tucking her comfortably under his arm, he made straight for the gate. Unluckily, just as he was about to go through, he looked back and caught a glimpse of the wonderful splendors from the open door of the palace. After all, there is no hurry, he said to himself. I may as well see something now I'm here. And turning back, forgetting all about the hen, which escaped from under his arm, and ran out to join her sisters. He was so much fascinated by the sight of all the beautiful things which he peeped through the door, that he scarcely noticed that he had lost the prize he had just won, and he did not remember that there was such a thing as a hen in the world when he beheld the sister of the sun sleeping on the bed before him. For some time he stood staring. Then he came to himself with a start, and feeling that he had no business there, he swiftly stole away, and was fortunate enough to recapture the hen, which he took with him to the gate. On the threshold he stopped again. Why should I not look at the sister of the sun? He thought to himself. She is asleep, and will never know. And he turned back for a second time and entered the chamber. The hen wriggled herself free as before. And when he had had his fill, he went out to the courtyard and picked up his hen, who was seeking more corn. As soon as he drew near the gate, he paused. Why did I not give her a kiss? He said to himself. I shall never kiss any woman so beautiful. And he wrung his hands with regret, so that the hen fell to the ground and ran away. But I can do it still, he cried with delight, and he rushed back to the chamber and kissed the sleeping maiden on the forehead. But alas, when he came out again, he found that the hen had grown so shy that she would not let him come near her. And worse than that, her sisters began to cluck so loudly that the sister of the sun was awakened by the noise. She jumped up in haste from her bed, and going to the door, she said to the boy, You shall never, never have my hen till you bring back my sister who was carried off by the giant to his castle, which is a long way off. Slowly and sadly the youth left the palace and told his story to his friends, who were waiting outside the gate, and how he had actually held the hen 3 times in his arms and lost her. I knew we should not get off so easily, said the fox, shaking his head. But there is no more time to waste. Let us set off at once to search for her sister. Luckily, I know the way. They walked on for many days, till at length the fox, who, as usual, was going first, stopped suddenly. The giant's castle is not far off now, he said. When we reach it, you 2 must remain outside while I go to fetch the princess. Directly as I bring her out, you must just catch hold of her tight and get away as fast as you can, while I return to the castle to talk to the giants, for there are many of them, so that they may not notice the escape of the princess. A few minutes later they arrived at the castle, and the fox, who had often been there before, slipped in without difficulty. There were several giants, both old and young, in the hall, and they were all dancing around the princess. As soon as they saw the fox, they cried out, "Come in and dance too, old fox. It's been a long time since we have seen you." So the fox stood up and did his steps with the best of them. But after a while he stopped and said, "I know a charming new dance that I should like to show you, but It can only be done by two people. If the princess will honor me for a few minutes, you will see how it is done.
Ah, that is delightful. We want something new, replied they,
He placed the princess between the outstretched arms of the fox. In one instant he had knocked over a great stand of lights that lighted the hall, and in the darkness had borne the princess to the gate. His comrades seized hold of her as they had been bidden, and the fox once again ran into the hall, before anyone had missed him. He found the giants busy trying to kindle a fire to get some light, but after a bit someone cried out,
"Where is the princess?"
"Here, in my arms," replied the fox. "Don't be afraid, she's quite safe." And he waited until he thought that his comrades had gained a good start, and put at least 5 or 6 mountains between themselves and the giants. Then he sprang through the door, calling as he went out, "The maiden is here! Take her if you can!" With these words the giants understood that their prize had escaped, and they ran off after the fox as fast as their great legs could carry him, thinking that they should soon come up on the fox, who they supposed to have the princess on his back. The fox, on his side, was far too clever to choose the same path that his friends had taken, and would in and out of the forest, so even at last he was tired out, fell fast asleep under a tree. Indeed, he was so exhausted with the day's work that he never heard the approach of the giants, and their hands were already outstretched to seize his tail when his eyes opened, and with a tremendous bound he was once more beyond their reach. All the rest of the night the fox ran and ran, but when bright red spread over the east, he stopped and waited till the giants were close upon him. Then he turned and said quietly, "Look, there's the sister of the sun." The giants raised their eyes all at once, and instantly turned into pillars of stone. The fox made each pillar a low bow, and set off to join his friends. He knew the great many shortcuts across the hill, so it was not long before he came up on them. And all four traveled day and night till they reached the castle of the sister of the sun. What joy and feasting there was throughout the palace at the sight of the princess whom they had mourned for dead, and they could not make enough of the boy who had gone through such dangers in order to rescue her. The golden hen was given to him at once, and more than that, the sister of the sun told him that, in a little time, when he was a few years older, she herself would pay a visit to his home and become his wife. The boy could hardly believe his ears when he heard that was in store for him, for it was the most beautiful princess in the world, and however thick the darkness might be, it fled away at once in the light of a star on her forehead. So the boy set forth on his journey home with his friends for company, his heart full of gladness when he was brought to the promise of the princess. But one by one his comrades dropped off at the places where they had first met him, and he was quite alone when he reached the native town and the gates of the palace. With a golden hen under his arm, he presented himself before the king, told of his adventures, and how he was going to have a wife for the princess so wonderful and unlike any other princesses, that the star on her forehead could turn night into day. The king listened silently, and when the boy was done, he said quietly, "If I find that your story is not true, I will have you thrown into a cask of pitch." "It is true, every word of it," answered the boy, and went on to tell that the day and even the hour were fixed when his bride was to come and seek him. But as the time drew near and nothing was heard of the princess, the youth became anxious and uneasy, especially when it came to his ears that the great cask was being filled with pitch, and the sticks were laid underneath to make a fire to boil it. All day long the boy stood at the window, looking over the sea by which the princess must travel. But there were no signs of her, not even the tiniest of white sails. And as he stood, the soldiers came and laid hands on him, and led him up to the cask, where a big fire was blazing, and a horrid black pitch boiling, bubbling over the sides. He looked and shuddered, but there was no escape, so he shut his eyes to avoid seeing. The word was given for him to mount the steps which led to the top of the cask, when suddenly some men were seen running with all their might, crying as they went that a large ship with sails spread was making its way toward the city. No one knew what the ship was or whence it came, but the king declared that he would not have the boy burned before its arrival. There would always be plenty of time for that. At length the vessel was safe in port, and a whisper went through the watching crowd that on board was the sister of the son, who had come to marry the young peasant, as she had promised. In a few moments more she had landed, and desired to be shown the way to the cottage where her bridegroom had so often described to her, whether he had been led back to the king's order at the first sign of the ship. "Don't you know me?" asked the sister of the son, bending over him where he lay, almost driven out of senses with terror. "No, I don't know you," answered the youth without raising his eyes. "Kiss me," said the sister of the son, and the youth obeyed her, but still without looking up. "Don't you know me now?" asked she. "No, I don't know you. I don't know you," he replied, with the manner of a man whom fear had driven mad. At this, the sister of the son grew rather frightened, and, beginning at the beginning, she told him the story of his meeting with her, and how she had come a long way in order to marry him. Just as she was finished, in walked the king to see if the boy had said was really true. But hardly had he opened the door of the cottage when he was almost blinded by the light that filled it, and he remembered what he had been told about the star on the forehead of the princess. He staggered back as if he had been struck. Then a curious feeling took hold of him, which he had never felt before, and falling on his knees before the sister of his son, he implored her to give up all thought of the peasant boy, and to share his throne. She but laughed, and said that she had a finer throne of her own, and if she wanted to sit on it, that she would be free to please herself, and would have no husband but the boy whom she had never had seen except for the king himself. "I shall marry him tomorrow," ended she, and ordered preparations to be set on foot at once. When the next day came, however, the bridegroom's father informed the princess that, by the law of the land, the marriage must take place in the presence of the king, but he hoped his majesty would not long delay his arrival. An hour or two had passed, and everyone was waiting and watching, when at last the sound of trumpets was heard, and the grand procession was seen marching up the street. A chair covered with velvet had been made ready for the king, and he took his seat upon it, and looking round upon the assembled company, said, "I have no wish to forbid this marriage, but before I can allow it to be celebrated, the bridegroom must prove himself worthy of such a bride by fulfilling three tasks. And the first is that in a single day he must cut down every tree in an entire forest." The youth stood aghast at the king's words. He had never cut down a tree in his life, and had not the least idea how to begin. And as for the whole forest... But the princess saw what was passing in his mind, and whispered to him, "Do not be afraid. In my ship you will find an axe, which you must use to carry off to the forest. When you have cut down one tree with it, just say, 'So let the forest fall.' In an instant all the trees will be put on the ground. But pick up 3 chips of the tree you felled, and put them in your pocket." And the young man did exactly as he was bid, and soon returned with the 3 chips safe in his coat. The following morning the princess declared that she had been thinking about the matter, and that, as she was not a subject of the king, she saw no reason why she should not be bound by his laws, and she meant to be married that very day. But the bridegroom's father told her that it was all very well for her to talk like that, but it was quite different for his son, who would pay with his head for any disobedience of the king's commands. However, in consideration of what the youth had done the day before, he hoped his majesty's heart might be softened, especially as he had sent a message that they might expect him at once. With this, the bridal pair had to be content, and be as patient as they could till the king's arrival. He did not keep them long, but they saw by his face that nothing good awaited them.
This marriage cannot take place, he said shortly, till the youth has joined to the roots of all the trees he cut down again.
This sounded much more difficult than he had done before, and he turned in despair to the sister of the sun. "It will be all right," she whispered encouragingly. "Take this water and sprinkle it on one of the fallen trees and say to it, so let all the trees in the forest stand upright. In a moment they will be erect again." And the young man did what he was told, and left the forest looking exactly as he had done before. Now surely, thought the princess, there was no longer any need to put off the wedding. She gave orders that all should be ready for the following day. But again, the old man interfered and declared that without the king's permission, no marriage could take place. For the third time, his majesty was sent for, and for the third time he proclaimed that he would not give his consent till the bridegroom should have slain a serpent which dwelt in the broad river that flowed at the back of the castle. Everyone knew stories of this terrible serpent, though no one had actually seen it. But from time to time, a child strayed from home and never came back. And then the mothers would forbid their other children to go near the river, which had juicy fruits and lovely flowers growing along its banks. "You will succeed in this also," whispered the sister of the sun, pressing his hand. "For in my ship is a magic sword which will cut through everything. Go down to the river and unfasten a boat which lies moored there. Throw the chips into the water, and when the serpent rears its body up, you will cut off its 3 heads with one blow with your sword. Then take the tip of each tongue and go with it tomorrow morning to the king's kitchen. If the king himself should enter, just say to him, 'Here are 3 gifts I offer you in return for the services demanded of me,' and throw the tips of the serpent's tongues at him. And hasten to the ship as fast as your legs can carry you, and be sure to take great care never to look behind you." The young man did exactly what the princess had told him. The 3 chips which he flung into the river became a boat, and as he steered across the stream, the serpent put its head up and hissed loudly. The youth had his sword ready, and in another second the 3 heads were bobbing on the water. Guiding his boat till he was beside them, he stood down and snipped off the ends of the tongues, and then rowed back to the bank of the stream. The next morning he carried them to the royal kitchen, and when the king entered, as was his custom, to see what he was going to have for dinner, the bridegroom flung them in his face, saying, "Here's a gift for you in return for your services you've asked me." And opening the kitchen door, he fled to the ship. And luckily he missed the way, and in excitement ran backwards and forwards without knowing where he was going. And at last, in despair, he looked round and saw to his amazement that both the city and the palace had vanished completely. Then he turned his eyes in the other direction, and far, far away he caught the sight of the ship with her sails spread and a fair wind behind her. This dreadful spectacle seemed to take away his senses, and all day long he wandered about, without knowing where he was going, till in the evening he noticed some smoke from little huts of turf nearby. He went straight up to it and cried, "Oh, mother, let me come in for pity's sake." The old woman who lived in the hut beckoned him to enter, and hardly as he was inside when he cried again, "Mother, can you tell me anything about the sister of the sun?" The old woman only shook her head. "No, I know nothing of her," said she. The young man turned to leave the hut, but the old woman stopped him, and giving him a letter, begged him to carry it to her next eldest sister, saying, "If you should get tired on the way, take the letter and rustle the paper." This advice surprised the young man a good deal. He did not see how it could help him, but he did not answer, and went down the road without knowing where he was going. At length he grew tired and could walk no more. Then he remembered what the old woman had said. After he had rustled the leaves only once, all fatigue disappeared, and he strode over the grass till he came to another little turf hut. "Let me in, I pray you, dear mother," asked he, and the door opened in front of him. "Your sister has sent you this letter," he said, and added quickly, Oh, Mother, can you tell me anything about the Sister of the Sun?
No, I know nothing of it, answered she. But as he turned hopelessly away, she stopped him. If you happen to pass my eldest sister's house, will you give her this letter? Said she. And should you get tired on the road, take it out of your pocket and rustle the paper. So the young man put the letter in his pocket and walked all day over hills till he reached the little turf hut, exactly like the other two. Let me in, pray you, dear mother, asked he, and as he answered, he added, Here's a letter from your sister, and can you tell me anything of the Sister of the Sun? Yes, I can, answered the old woman. She lives in the castle on the Banka. Her father lost the battle only a few days ago because you had stolen his sword from him, and the Sister of the Sun herself is almost dead with grief. But when you see her, stick a pin into the palm of her hand and suck the drops of blood that flow. Then she will grow calmer and will know you again. But beware, for before you reach the castle on the bank, fearful things will happen. He thanked the old woman with tears of gladness for the good news she had given him, and he continued his journey. But he had not gone very far when, at the turn of a road, he met two brothers who were quarreling over a piece of cloth. My good men, what are you fighting about? He said. That cloth does not look like it's worth much. Oh, it's ragged enough, they answered, but it was left to us by our father, and any man who wraps it around him, no one can see him, and we each want it for our own. Let me put it round me for a moment, said the youth, and then I will tell you whose it ought to be. The brothers were pleased with his idea and gave him the stuff, but the moment he had thrown it around his shoulder, he disappeared, as completely as if he had never been there at all. Meanwhile, the young man walked briskly along till he came up to other men who were disputing over a tablecloth. What's the matter? Asked he, and stopped in front of them. If this cloth is spread on a table, answered they, the table is instantly covered with the most delicious food. We each want to have it. Let me try the tablecloth, said the youth, and I will tell you whose it ought to be. The two men were pleased with this idea, and handed him the cloth, and he hastily threw the first piece out over his shoulders, and vanished from sight, leaving the two men grieving over their own folly. The young man had not walked far before he saw two more men standing by the roadside, both grasping at the same stout staff, and sometimes one seemed to get the point of getting it, and then sometimes the other. What are you two quarreling about? You could cut half a dozen sticks from a piece of wood just as good as that, said the young man. And as he spoke, both fighters stopped and looked at him. Ah, you may think so, he said, but one blow out of the end of this stick will kill him, while a touch from the other end will bring him back to life. You won't easily find another stick like that. No, that is true, answered the young man. Let me look at it, and I will tell you whose it ought to be. The men were pleased with this idea, and handed him the staff. It's very curious, certainly, said he. But which end is it that restores people to life? After all, anyone who is killed by a blow of a stick is only hard enough. But when the end was shown, he threw the staff over his shoulders and vanished. At last, he saw another set of men who were struggling over the possession of a pair of shoes. Why can't you leave that old pair of shoes alone? He said. Why would you not walk a yard in them? Oh, yes, they're old enough, answered they. But whoever puts them on and wishes himself at a particular place gets there without going. Well, that sounds very clever, said the youth. Let me try them, and then I shall see who will be able to tell who they ought to belong to. This idea pleased the men, and they handed him the shoes.
But the moment they were on his feet, he cried, "I wish to be in the castle in the banca!" And before he knew it, he was there, and he found the sister of the son dying from grief. He knelt down beside her, and pulling a pin, he struck it into the palm of her hand, so that a drop of blood gushed out. Then he stopped, and he had been told to by the old woman. And immediately the princess came to herself and flung her arms around his neck. Then she told him all the story, and what had happened since the ship had sailed away without him. "But the worst misfortune of all," she added, "was a battle which my father lost to you and vanished from his magic sword. And out of his whole army, only one man was left." "Show me the battlefield," said he. And she took him to the wild heath, where the dead were lying as they fell, waiting for burial. One by one he had touched them with the end of his staff, till at length they all stood before him. Throughout the kingdom there was nothing but joy, and this time the wedding was really celebrated, and the bridal pair lived happily in the castle and the banca till they died.